We watched the United States falsification of body counts. In fact, the glorification of body counts. We listened while month after month we were told the back of the enemy was about to break. We fought using weapons against Oriental human beings with quotation marks around that. We fought using weapons against those people which I do not believe this country would dream of using were we fighting in a European theater, or let us say a non-third world people theater. And so we watched while men charged up hills because a general said that hill has to be taken. And after losing one platoon or two platoons, they marched away to leave the hill for the reoccupation of the North Vietnamese. Because we watched pride allow the most unimportant of battles to be blown into extravaganzas. Because we couldn't lose, and we couldn't retreat, and because it didn't matter how many American bodies were lost to prove that point. And so there were Hamburger Hills and caissons and Hill 881s and Firebase 6s and so many others. And now we're told that the men who fought there must watch quietly while American lives are lost so that we can exercise the incredible arrogance of Vietnamizing the Vietnamese. Each day,
making a very significant statement, and don't let him proceed.
Each day, to facilitate the process by which the United States washes her hands of Vietnam, someone has to give up his life, so that the United States doesn't have to admit something that the entire world already knows, so that we can't say that we've made a mistake. Someone has to die so that President Nixon won't be, and these are his words, the first president to lose a war. And we are asking Americans to think about that. Because how do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake? But we're trying to do that. And we're doing it with thousands of rationalizations. And if you read carefully the president's last speech to the people of this country, you can see that he says and says clearly, but the issue, gentlemen, the issue is communism. And the question is whether or not we will leave that country to the communists or whether or not we will try to give it a hope to be a free people. But the point is they're not a free people now. Under us, they're not a free people. And we cannot fight communism all over the world, and I think we should have learned that lesson by now. But the problem of veterans goes beyond this personal problem. Because you think about a poster in this country with a picture of Uncle Sam, and the picture says, "I want you." And a young man comes out of high school and says, "That's fine, I'm going to serve my country." And he goes to Vietnam, and he shoots, and he kills, and he does his job. Or maybe he doesn't kill, maybe he just goes, and he comes back. And when he gets back to this country, he finds that he isn't really wanted. Because the largest unemployment figure in the country, it varies depending on who you get it from, the Veterans Administration, 15%, various other sources, 22%, but the largest figure of unemployed in this country are veterans of this war. And of those veterans, 33% of the unemployed are black. That means 1 out of every 10 of the nation's unemployed is a veteran of Vietnam. The hospitals across the country won't or can't meet their demands. It's not a question of not trying, they haven't got the appropriations. A man recently died after he had a tracheotomy in California. Not because of the operation, but because there wasn't enough personnel to clean the mucus out of his tube, and he suffocated to death. Another young man just died in a New York VA hospital the other day. A friend of mine was lying in a bed 2 beds away and tried to help him. But he couldn't. They rang a bell, and there was no one there to service that man. And so he died of convulsions. 57%, I understand 57% of all those entering VA hospitals talk about suicide. And some 27% have tried. And they try because they come back to this country and they have to face what they did in Vietnam, and then they come back and find the indifference of a country that doesn't really care, that doesn't really care. And suddenly we're faced with a very sickening situation in this country because there's no moral indignation. And if there is, it comes from people who are almost exhausted by their past indignancies, and I know that many of them are sitting in front of me. The country seems to have lain down and accepted something as serious as Laos, just as we calmly shrugged off the loss of 700,000 lives in Pakistan, the so-called greatest disaster of all times. We are here as veterans to say that we think we are in the midst of the greatest disaster of all times now, because they are still dying over there, and not just Americans, Vietnamese. And we are rationalizing leaving that country so that those people can go on killing each other for years to come. Americans seem to have accepted the idea that the war is winding down, at least for Americans. And they have also allowed the bodies which were once used by a president for statistics to prove that we were winning this war to be used as evidence against a man who followed orders and who interpreted those orders no differently than hundreds of other men in South Vietnam. We veterans can only look with amazement on the fact that this country has not been able to see that there's absolutely no difference between a ground troop and a helicopter crew. And yet people have accepted a differentiation fed them by the administration. No ground troops are in Laos, so it's all right to kill Laotians by remote control. But believe me, the helicopter crews fill the same body bags, and they wreak the same kind of damage on the Vietnamese and Laotian countryside as anyone else. And the president is talking about allowing that to go on for many years to come. And one can only ask if we will really be satisfied when the troops march into Hanoi. We are asking here in Washington for some action. Action from the Congress of the United States of America, which has the power to raise and maintain armies, and which by the Constitution also has the power to declare war. We've come here not to the president, because we believe that this body can be responsive to the will of the people, and we believe that the will of the people says that we should be out of Vietnam now. We're here in Washington also to say that the problem of this war is not just a question of war and diplomacy. It's part and parcel of everything that we are trying as human beings to communicate to people in this country. The question of racism, which is rampant in the military, and so many other questions also. The use of weapons, the hypocrisy in our taking umbrage in the Geneva Conventions and using that as justification for a continuation of this war, when we are more guilty than any other body of violations of those Geneva Conventions, in the use of free fire zones, harassment, interdiction fire, search and destroy missions, the bombings, the torture of prisoners, the killing of prisoners, accepted policy by many units in South Vietnam. That's what we're trying to say. It's part and parcel of everything. An American Indian friend of mine who lives on the Indian nation of Alcatraz put it to me very succinctly. He told me how as a boy on an Indian reservation he had watched television, and he used to cheer the cowboys when they came in and shot the Indians. And then suddenly one day he stopped in Vietnam, and he said, "My God, I'm doing to these people the very same thing that was done to my people." And he stopped. And that's what we're trying to say, that we think this thing has to end. We're also here to ask, we are here to ask, and we're here to ask vehemently, where are the leaders of our country? Where is the leadership? We're here to ask, where are McNamara, Barstow, Bundy, Gilpatrick, and so many others? Where are they now that we, the men whom they sent off to war, have returned? These are commanders who have deserted their troops, and there is no more serious crime in the law of war. The Army says they never leave their wounded. The Marines say they never leave even their dead. These men have left all the casualties and retreated behind a pious shield of public rectitude. They've left the real stuff of their reputations bleaching behind them in the sun in this country. And finally, this administration has done us the ultimate dishonor. They have attempted to disown us and the sacrifices we made for this country. In their blindness and fear, they have tried to deny that we are veterans or that we served in Nam. We do not need their testimony. Our own scars and stumps of limbs are witness enough for others, and for ourselves, we wish that a merciful God could wipe away our own memories of that service, as easily as this administration has wiped their memories of us. But all that they have done, and all that they can do by this denial, is to make more clear than ever our own determination to undertake one last mission, to search out and destroy the last vestige of this barbaric war, to pacify our own hearts, to conquer the hate and fear that have driven this country these last 10 years and more. And more. And so when 30 years from now our brothers go down the street without a leg, without an arm or a face, and small boys ask why, we will be able to say Vietnam, and not mean a desert, not a filthy, obscene memory, but mean instead the place where America finally turned, and where soldiers like us helped it in the turning. Thank you.